I think it's time to introduce our next speaker for the day, our esteemed guest, Dr. Tara KG. Dr. Tara was a member of the first Disaster Management Authority of Government of Kerala and served as the head of the Disaster Management Center. She worked as a senior scientist in the Remote Sensing and Environment Center and was the coordinator of the project on climate resilience of urban cities. Having served as a panelist in the National Disaster Management Authority, Dr. Tara presently serves as guest faculty in disaster management. Dr. Tara is also the external mentor of the Department of Education. Her contribution includes 15 reports, 50 publications in journals and popular magazines on geology, disaster management, and GIS from NRSA. She is also an eminent figure in radio programs and TV programs on disaster management. Welcome, Dr. Tara. I also request all the participants to please drop in your questions in the chat box along with the presentation so that we do not have much delay. Thank you.
So shall we begin?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you, Ansika, for briefly introducing me to the audience. I hope the sharing option is given to me so that I can go ahead with my presentation.
Yes, ma'am. You have been made the presenter. You can start presenting.
Okay.
I hope you can
Thank
see the
you.
share button.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, your screen
I
is
hope
visible now.
the screen is visible to you.
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Okay, good. So, first of all, a big thank you to the organizers and also the audience for giving me this opportunity to talk to you. We are here to share a few information about disasters, especially in the last few decades, and what are the issues and challenges involved in disaster management, especially in the field of engineering, with specific reference to the field of architecture. And I think the greatest disaster which man has ever faced, especially post-corona, is the flood of series of webinars and Zoom meetings. And I wish you all the best, to all the participants of this seminars. And my talk is basically divided into four aspects. One is the review of recent disasters and what are the issues and challenges involved, and what could be the role of architects, and what is the way forward. India is ranked third in when it comes to the number of disasters which had happened in the recent past. Around 80,000 lives were lost, and it left 100 crore people affected in all these disasters. And when you look at the number of disasters, China still tops the list, followed by United States of America, and we are third in the list with 321 disasters. And our land as such is vulnerable to earthquakes. 55% of our land is vulnerable to earthquakes. 8% of our land is vulnerable to cyclones, and 70% of the land is vulnerable to droughts. And when it comes to flood, 12% of the total land is vulnerable, is prone to floods. And last 20 years, if you look at the data, statistics of disasters, climate-related disasters have increased, tremendously. Earlier, it was just 59 incidents. Now it has become, in the last 20 years, it has become 820 incidents. So you can see the increase in the scale of incidents of climate-related disasters. And of all the people who are killed in the disasters, around 2/3 are because of flood and droughts. And how much money we are spending? We are spending, as per the United Nations account, $79.5 billion had to be spent from 1998 to 2017. And there is an increase in the spending in in managing the disasters. An increase of 151% has been noticed in the spending, especially in trying to when you try to manage disasters through mitigation or prevention. You incur a lot of loss, incur a lot of expenditure, and also you have to suffer a huge amount of loss as well. And let us focus on the most prevalent disaster. If you look at the scenario, disaster scenario, mostly heavy rainfall and related floods, they can be considered as the second most prevalent disaster. Around 17 floods happen per annum in India, incurring a loss of 34.5 crore rupees every year. And if you compare ourselves with China, it is 20 incidences of flood per annum, and affecting 90 crore people. I mean, the earlier figure also 34.5 is the number of people affected, not the amount of loss. Sorry for that mistake. And we have experienced massive flood in Uttarakhand way back in 2013. Around 6,000 people lost their lives, and Kerala also had to bear the brunt of floods. We all know that in 2018 we had to face a massive flood where we lost 504 lives, and affecting 2.3 crore people. That will amount to 2/3 of the total population of the state. And we also have had our share of cyclones in both in the state and as well as in our country. There has been 41 cyclones since 2012, of which 28 were very severe in nature. And we all know that cyclones are low pressure areas, which involves massive flooding and storm surge and heavy rainfall activities. And 2020 itself, last year, we had to face 5 major, very severe cyclones: Amphan, Nisarga, Nivar, Burevi, and Gati. So, and the first time that we were exposed to a massive cyclone was Oki, way back in 2017, where 174 fishermen lost their lives. And Oki is still considered as the major cyclone in the last 50 years. And if you look at the increase in the incidence of the number of cyclones in India, and also the increasing magnitude of the disaster, you can see that on the left hand side there is a map of India showing a few portions in blue colored regions. These are all areas which are vulnerable to wind as well as cyclones. And it is very evident that only the eastern portion is shown as vulnerable to cyclones. This map was prepared a few years ago. That means I think it was prepared in 2001, and now things have changed. Now this is the picture, like where in all the southern region, there has been an increase on the western side also. 25% of the cyclones which had happened in the last few years were on the western side. So it means that as the temperature is building up, global warming, and as the temperature of the sea surface also goes up, there is a corresponding increase in the cyclone incidence, both on the west side and the right hand side of the continent. So what are the issues and challenges? We know that India as a whole, is having many regions which are prone to multiple disasters, and all the red colored zones show these regions shown in red color. These do not represent districts where the left party is going to come to power in the next election. No, it means that these red colored zones are vulnerable to multiple disasters of very severe nature. And look at Kerala, it is from top to bottom, it is shown as red in color. And what are the issues, main issue involved in reconstruction and rebuilding, or rebuilding, or bringing back to normalcy, is the construction field. In 2018 alone, we had to witness destruction of we, in the sense, the state, Kerala state, had to witness the destruction of around 2,51,000 and 227 houses, and 14,000, around 50,000 houses totally collapsed. So the main challenge is to come up with a design which would resist mainly the flood. And we theoretically know that any house, any structure built on pillars is going to survive a flood. But the problem here is that anything on pillars is not going to be very resistant to earthquakes. So these are called as soft storied buildings. And a soft storied building is not going to survive a major earthquake. So we also know that India is divided into 4 zones when it comes to the seismic vulnerability. This is zone 4, which is having a maximum intensity. All these red colored zones, wherever you see these red spots, these are vulnerable to very high intensity earthquakes. And these are followed by these orange colored zones, which are zone these are zone 5s, these red colored zones. These orange colored zones are zone 4, which are of lesser intensity. And these yellow colored zones represent zone 3 regions, where moderate intensity earthquakes are likely. Moderate intensity means anything around or between 5 and 6.5 magnitude, which is a massive earthquake. So all the Kerala portion falls in zone 3. So our greatest challenge is that we have to come up with a building design which would cater to multiple disasters, both the floods as well as the earthquakes, multiple disaster resistant constructions. I would term it as the the most significant challenge that we have to face, especially in the field of civil engineering and also the architecture field. And we have come up with a seismic building code way back in 1993. We have come up with a cyclone resistant code 2004, tsunami resistant code after 2004. But we are yet to come up with a design, comprehensive building design, which would cater to multiple disasters. So I think that is the greatest challenge that we still have to face. And I think the next challenge is to go for alternative building materials. I think the previous speaker was speaking about the need, and she was giving various options for alternative building materials. We know that these resources are dwindling very fast. The hills in Kerala and elsewhere, they're fast disappearing. In no time, these hills just vanish. And we also know that we have to be aware and conscious that it takes 50 lakh years for a rock to form. It is not in our lifetime, not in the lifetime of our grandchildren also, or great grandfather. It takes 50 long years, lakh years to, to form. And how much time does it take for sand to form? These rock, they have to be get exposed to sun, wind, and rain, and then get disintegrated into smaller particles. And it takes around anything around 3,000 to 4,000 years for the rock to get disintegrated into sand. And what are the other options we have? We know that there are green options, and I would like to bring your attention to some of the options which have been discussed, I think, many years ago by Central Road Research Institute. One among them is the use of copper slag, which is a byproduct of thermal power plants. It's a copper smelting process. You end up with copper slag. And India is exporting 6 to 6.5 million tons per annum to various other countries, especially to Singapore. This can be a useful or a very good substitute for sand, so they say. And Singapore is using these copper slag for their road construction. And look at the perfect roads that they are having. And we are exporting this to Singapore and ending up with roads like this in India. And there is also the CRRI, Central Road Research Institute, also have published various articles. This is a central government institute which is mainly focusing on the alternative building materials. They also say that the construction and demolition waste can also be reused, which we rarely do. In Delhi alone, they say that 15 lakh tons of construction and demolition waste is available per annum. So this is a great resource which can be utilized. And third challenge, third issue that we have to be aware of is that we have to scale down the dwellings or structures or habitats into the minimum space that is required for a human being to survive. We all know that 33% of Indians, they live in a space less than the space available for a prisoner in US. So we have to limit the space, and with the same comforts, like it has to be energy efficient and it has to be climate resilient and so on and so forth. So use only what is absolutely essential, especially the natural resources, because we know that these resources are not, eternal, and the resources are dwindling. And here in this, opportunity, I would like to speak about this gentleman. We all know who he is, especially anyone who has been reading newspaper. They would definitely know who this gentleman is. And what is so special about him? He has a very small house in Mumbai, which the total cost is only 5,600 crore rupees. And it's just 24 stories. And the saddest part is that only 3 helicopters can land at a time on top of this building. What a disaster, and what a sad state of affairs. And we also know that, the recent and draft environmental impact assessment notification, it has taken away the, the limitation which it earlier had in construction. Like earlier it was 20,000 square meter space for any construction, but now it has been increased sevenfold. So now the any project which takes up about 150,000 square meter doesn't require any kind of environmental impact assessment studies. So we have to be concerned about the people who do not have a roof over them, and all the resources that we utilize in building huge houses and huge, these flats. These resources also belong to them. I mean, they also have a right over these resources. And look at the fast pace of urbanization that we have been experiencing in Kerala. We developed so fast that, all the natural vegetations are soon vanishing. The same thing has happened in Chennai also. I'm citing examples from southern India, so that these are examples which have happened in the recent past, and it is also happening in northern India as well. We have witnessed the flood in Chennai, we have witnessed the flood in Kerala, we have seen what has happened in Chamoli. So these are all examples good enough for us to understand that this, unburdened, uncontrolled pace of development is not going to save us, not at all. And look at China, which is having the same kind of issues, like high population and great, high levels of air pollution, and all these high incidents of flood, so on and so forth. All the problems that we have, they are also facing in a larger scale. They are converting cities into forest areas. So they have a pet project like Forest City project, where they have chosen 35 cities, major cities, and they're converting them into forest areas. This is mainly done to control floods, because each tree can absorb water 96 times its mass. So a great amount of water will be absorbed by these trees, so that lesser amount of water will reach the road. And now this is the latest issue in Trivandrum, where for the Pujapura is a place in Trivandrum, quite near to my residence, where the Ayurveda hospital is cutting down this beautiful, the trees and natural vegetation to come up with a multi-storied hospital complex. And there has been a lot of protest. I mean, there is some protest going on against this, but I don't know, because of I don't know about the fate of these natural vegetation, because the authorities keep saying that we will plant double the number of trees that we cut. And we all know that any person with some ecological sense will know that cutting down you can't replace a cut tree. Cutting down trees and replanting is is amount to destroying the soil, because all the nutrients, when you cut a tree, all the nutrients that the soil was holding, especially phosphorus and other nutrients, it will be completely lost. And I think we have to come to terms with controlled development. That concept, I think, it has to sink in our minds. And next challenge or next issue is to find, green alternative building materials. Bamboo can be considered as an option. And India, when it comes to bamboo varieties, it ranks second. And the first position naturally goes to China. So we have 136 species which are, I think, underutilized. And when it comes to resistance to earthquake and wind, these structures and these buildings built of bamboo, they are found to be quite resistant to natural disasters, especially to earthquakes and wind. And in some countries like Southern America, these are also utilized for construction of bridges also. I mean, these are all load-bearing structures, and they are highly useful as load-bearing structures as well. So, and we also, when we talk about the challenges and issues, I think we have to always remember that whatever we build, it has to have, because it has to be um, it has to be utilized for various other multiple purposes also. For example, in the last 2018, 1.45 million people were they had to be shifted to relief camps in Kerala. So and all the existing schools and major auditoriums, they served the purpose of temporary shelters. So whatever we build, be it a school or a major auditorium, it has to be for multiple purposes, because we have very limited space. Kerala is a small state where we have very limited land and very limited resources also. So multi-purpose structures should be our motto. And also it should be our motto to preserve natural vegetation and natural topography to the extent possible. For example, all these sand dunes which we used to see along the beaches, they are now vanishing because we have not done enough to conserve them. And these sand dunes with their natural tree grass and natural grass vegetation, they serve as the first barrier to sea waves, and also to a very great extent tsunami, tsunami waves. So they can even stop high tides and the soil erosion, etc., etc. So and this is very important that we preserve the natural vegetation and natural topography along the beaches, because we are witnessing a rise in sea level, especially because as the temperature goes up, water expands. And in Kochi itself, in Kerala, it is reported that we have seen Kochi has witnessed a 12 to 40 centimeter rise in sea level in the last 80 years. And we also have to come up with a building technology which will cater to multiple disasters. Some students and some teachers in Barton Hill Engineering College, they have come up with a novel idea of building amphibian houses. I think this has already been experimented in Netherlands. This has already been experimented in Netherlands and also Philippines to some extent. These amphibian houses, they will float when the floodwater comes, and it will just sit on the ground back to the original place when the floodwater recedes. So there is some kind of a floating device made of plastic, underneath, and which will help the structure to float. And these are vertical structures which help the structure being from getting drifted in the flood water. And this was I think proposed in Monroe Turat Island, which is an island which is going down with respect to the mean sea level. So it is an island where these kind of interventions are badly needed. And we also know that we have to deal with, in addition to cyclones, earthquakes, and flood and drought, we also have to deal with the rising temperature. And in the last 20 years, if you look at the statistics, the heat waves are the reason, are responsible for 13% of the total casualty. And look at this map of India. This is all red in color. Wherever you see red in color, the temperature has gone up multiple degrees compared to previous years. And 2015 May and June, India as a whole experienced very high temperature, and which resulted in around 2,248 casualties. So whatever we construct, we have to, apart from giving adequate facilities for the natural light to seep in, we have to have provisions to keep it cool naturally. I mean, without having to depend on artificial aids like air conditioners. And we had already faced two droughts in 2002 and 2015, which incurred heavy loss, 65 crore rupees and 43 crore was the approximate loss that we had to incur. And nearly 30% of 30% of all the people who have been affected in these globally, if you look at the statistics, nearly 30% of the people who have been affected in the drought episodes are from India. So this is something which we have to keep in mind, because as the drought episodes increases, we have to have means for conserving and reuse of water also. And Singapore is the best example, is a country where these stormwater drains, during storms, these water is getting drained into underground huge storage tubs, which is recycled. And 18% of the total use of Singaporeans are from this reused storm water. So I think we need to take a re-look at how best we can utilize the existing drainage system, and can we convert it into convert them in any way, in any manner, so that we can replenish the groundwater table and also minimize the flood discharge. So and we also have to tackle the issue of waste that we generate. This is a famous example of example from Chennai, where Chennai Corporation. I mean, this the Pallikaranai. Pallikaranai is a place where which was I mean, which was having a beautiful wetland ecosystem with a lot of very rare species of birds and other organisms flourishing there. But the Chennai Corporation took over this site, 250 acres, and converted it into a land where, or designated it as a land where all the city waste, corporation waste, would be dumped. And this is how this is exactly how this beautiful ecosystem, which was in the which looked like this in the a few years ago, it looks like this now. So 1,500 tons of waste daily is being dumped into this place every year. So I think we also have to have some idea about, or about how the land should be utilized. I mean, we have to come up with a pressing demand is that we have to come up with a land use policy at the earliest. We still don't have a land use policy in Kerala, and neither in India. So no state in India is having a land use policy. I mean, for where you can build, where you can cultivate, and where you should have open spaces, green spaces, there's absolutely no rule there. And this is the problem with the climate treaties also. Way back in 1992, we have signed the Rio climate treaty. But the saddest point is that, and 178 nations have signed this document in 1992. But the problem is that it is not binding. If you want to binding on any of the nations who signed this treaty, if you want to follow these treaty regulations, you are free to follow. But if you are not very keen to follow, you have the options not to do that. So it is non-binding in nature, and this is exactly the situation with our environmental laws and regulations as well. In 1978, there has been a floodplain regulation act which came into existence many years ago, but still we don't follow that. What does it say? It says that as the river originates from the mountains and it flows down the hill, it carries along with it a lot of sediments and gravel, and when it slows down, it just deposits these sediments on both sides of the river. These are called as the floodplains, and no construction should be allowed in these floodplains, as these are the most fertile land which can be utilized for cultivating. And also these floodplains are so essential for controlling the flood of the river. But we have done exactly the reverse. We have constructed in the floodplain. This is a famous example from Kerala, Maradu flats, which violated all the CRZ 3 norms. And the case started in 2006, and it took almost 20 long years for the case to be argued out. And finally, the Supreme Court decided or ordered that these massive structures should be demolished. What a waste of construction materials, and how much ecological damage it would have, it had already caused, both in the construction and also in the demolition. And from 2018 flood, the main lesson that we have to learn, and we have never learned, is that rivers do not forget the ways, the pathways which they used to flow. This is the same area where a lot of buildings had come up, But in 2018, when the rivers overflowed, the rivers, they didn't hesitate to flow along these, drainage channels. So I think we need to control the developments in such a way that we respect the uh, ecological needs, and we respect the environment also. And the recent Chamoli disaster, now the experts have started to say that it is because of the rampant building of dams and constructions across the Himalayan rivers, and just leave the Himalayas alone so that we don't have to face more disasters like this. And in Uttarakhand, where this has happened, the flood had ravaged the place in 2013. Now, the experts, the scientists, they fear that this will again happen in the next few years, because still the roads which had been built there, they have been built cutting across the seismic fault lines. This is a fault zone. This fracture zone is along which the displacement of both portions have taken place. And they have also built a lot of buildings have come up over old drains. A lot of construction have been done on floodplains. So these are all going to add up together, and a waiting is in wait. A disaster is in the waiting. And take the case of cities which have grown in the recent past. Bangalore is a city which has developed, if you can call it development, I mean, which has come up in a long way, flouting all the National Green Tribunal regulations. NGT says that anything 75 meter from the lake boundary, no construction should be allowed. And all the 19 lakh properties will have to be demolished in the city if we are to abide by the NGT regulations. And fortunately, some good initiatives are also happening there. They have come up with a website portal where the common man can just log into that website, www Raja Kalwe. It's a web portal where you can find out whether your property, the land which you are going to buy, or the land where you actually and already is living, falls in an encroachment land, or is it in the red zone or gray zone or yellow zone. And Kerala, I think as a state, we need to be doubly cautious in construction activities, because we have the highest number of eco-sensitive zones in India. No other state is having so much of eco-sensitive zones. And we also need to go for international and national cooperation. I mean, cutting across all boundaries. We have to seek guidance and help from, apart from getting support from traditional wisdom. We have to get national and international assistance also. And we can't be saying that this is our internal affair, and whatever disaster we are facing, no foreign country needs to poke their nose into our affair. Because we know that the recent earthquake in North Delhi, just a few days ago, this originated in Pakistan. So we can't be saying that, okay, it originated in Pakistan, so the earthquake tremors need not reach here. I mean, talking about boundaries and how silly it is to, say that. I mean, the concept of boundary itself is a silly notion, I would say, because, I mean, scientifically speaking, or spiritually speaking, This is just I just came across this very interesting example where the boundary between Belgium and Netherlands, these are two countries, these pass through the middle of the house. Here this woman is standing on in one country, and this man on in another country, because one is standing in Belgium and the other one is standing in Netherlands. And interestingly, this passes through inside a shop also. This is a canteen where it passes right through the middle of this canteen, and on one side it is Belgium, the other side is Netherlands. So I think we need to go for building up of an international cooperation where we seek help and we also give help to others. And most important is that whatever we construct, we have to keep in mind that as we cut down the vegetation and as we interfere with the nature, we are increasing the pollution also, which is already very high compared to global standards. Most polluted cities, India is the country which is having the highest number of polluted cities in the world, and 15,000 babies die prematurely in Delhi alone, mainly due to these air pollution effects. And China as a nation is also facing these similar kind of problems, and they built world's highest tallest air purifier. It can purify the air in a radius of 300 kilometers from this I think around this air purifier. And what did we do? We also have the same problem of air pollution, and we built the tallest statue in the world. 3,000 crore rupees had to be spent. And optimum utilization of all the building materials, all the resources, even water, sand and soil and rocks, is very important, because we are occupying the 100th position in a total number of 109 countries when it comes to hunger index. That means that a lot of people are still hungry in our country. So we have to use our natural resources judiciously. And way forward, I'm coming to the end of the presentation. Way forward includes, it is high time that we include engineering, geology for architects also. It is already included in the civil engineering stream. And inclusion of disaster management, I don't know whether it has already been done now in the syllabus. I was teaching in TKM Engineering College for about 13 years. At that time, it was not included, but it is high time that we include disaster management as a topic in engineering. It is now, if my understanding is right, it is now included as an elective. Instead of that, it should be a common topic for all the streams. And inclusion, and instead of concentrating only at the higher education level, I think we need to be talking about inclusion of disaster management at the school level also. No state syllabus has, I mean, especially in Kerala, we don't have it in the state syllabus. CBSE school only have included disaster management in the school syllabus. And we also have to be aware that there are 100 billion galaxies around us, and 1 billion is 100 crores. We all know, and our Milky Way is just a small one. Galaxy amidst the 100 billion galaxies known to exist in the universe. And modern man came to existence only just 1.5 lakh years ago, and the age of Earth is 4.5 billion years. We just came very recently, and viruses and other these pathogens, they have existed since the last 300 lakh years. So compare this 300 lakh years with 1.5 lakh years. And all the mammals are already the host of 3,20,000 viruses. So the scientists say. So we need to talk about how we can coexist with other living organisms, other living beings, like spiders, the birds, and the ants, and all the other living organisms, because the earth belongs to them also, not only to us. And the moment you spotted the spider, you take a broom and then smash it, and then that's the end of it. But these are natural predators of mosquitoes, cockroaches, earwig, and a whole lot of other so-called pests, which are very harmful for to crops. So spiders, they prey on aphids. Aphid is a threat to farming, because it affects the yield of the crops. And spider is a friend of a farmer, and a friend of a farmer is our friend also, because a population of India is, in the next 20-25 years, it is going to be equal to China's population plus the population of United States. Additional 430 million mouths are to be fed, and we have to increase the yield. And how do we increase the yield? By promoting the farming, and also by providing the environment which is convenient for them to do the farming. I mean, we have to coexist with all the other living organisms. And 1.5 degrees centigrade rise, or just 2 millimeter rise in precipitation, is going to result in a decline of yield in rice production. So just to reiterate, a friend, farmer is our friend, friend of farmer is our friend as well. So try to live with other living organisms, like spiders, birds, and other living organisms. After all, we are all the same. There is absolutely no difference between human beings and other living organisms, because we belong to the same earth. And by about 2050, 1 million animals will disappear, will become extinct because of human interventions. And ultimately, who will remain when all these beautiful animals vanish? Ultimately, we will end up with human beings like this. So they are often the animals are better than many of the human beings. I would end my presentation with this video. This is a wild bear just walking past a traffic cone, and look at what it is doing. It just sets it straight. It just sets it straight, and is walking by. So I think they are better than many of us. So I would end my presentation here. It is no longer our duty, but it has become the absolute necessity that we learn to coexist with the environment and also with other living organisms. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, for the informative presentation. I hope that the presentation has made us even more conscious and quite ashamed of our actions as architects and engineers. Ma'am, will we have one question and one comment? Shall we take that?
Sorry, I think the voice is your voice is not audible. Can you repeat, please?
Ma'am, we have one. We'll take the questions now.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah. Okay. Ma'am, the first question is, are floods in the recent past predominantly due to change in intensity or pattern of rainfall or faulty planning?
I would say that it is a combination of both these factors, because in the last few years, intensity of rainfall has definitely changed. It has become more rainfall in shorter period of time. So, and it is also due to, it has this has been aggravated by human interventions. So I think it is a like, for example, I mean, we have converted all the open spaces into built up land. So there is very little space for the rainwater, excessive rainwater happening in a short period of time to go. It can't seep into the soil and become a part of the groundwater table, because there is no soil left. Very little soil is left. And the top soil has been, you know, they got eroded, leaving it, making it very difficult for the water to seep down. So I think it is a combination of both, a change in the precipitation, and also which is aggravated by human intervention. That is the reason why the floods have become more destructive in nature.
Yes, ma'am. We also have a comment from Vishal Chetri, one of the participants. I'll just read that out to you. We have master plan for our cities to promote planned development. However, due to poor implementation and monitoring, there are many illegal construction and deviations from the actual master plan. For cities and villages in Kerala, the government has provided an FSI of 4, but still issues such as urban sprawl is prevailing in the cities. Also, the state attempts to conserve the agricultural land through some acts, but it has no effect. There are numerous incidences where I observed such conversion of agricultural land to retail. Yes, ma'am. Would you like to
Yeah,
comment
it's
on
just
that?
an observation. Is it not so? I
Yes.
totally agree with that observation. Where I think we have reduced the extent of farmlands. We have reduced the extent of open spaces. We have reduced the green spaces, and I think we need to redefine the concept of we need to redefine the concept of development now. What do we mean by the term development? Is it a sustainable growth that we are aiming at, or is it just uncontrolled urbanization that we are talking about? A 40-meter wide road is often touted as the ultimate game, ultimate aim of development. But I think it is high time that we become conscious that sustainable development is it also means it also makes it essential that each one has got good air to breathe, and good land to live upon, and good quality water to drink. These are the basic necessities of human existence. I mean, apart from the 45-meter wide road, good water, good air, and good land, soil. These are the basic necessities which would make our existence more worthy, I think.
Yes, ma'am. Also, the last question, can you please elaborate on, ma'am, is it audible? Am I audible to you?
No, I think your voice is very feeble. Maybe something is wrong with my computer also. Can you just raise up your...
Yes, ma'am. Am I audible now?
Yes, 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 very much. Please.
Okay, ma'am. So the last question is, ma'am, what is your opinion on where the gap is more of an issue? Is it the social apprehension, or is it the economics of development, or is it the politics? Where is the gap more of an issue?
Where is a gap in the sense? I mean, gap in the perception, or
Implementation of sustainable development.
I think we have to start with an awareness sensitization of the policymakers, and also uh, people who are at the decision making levels. So sensitization of to sensitize these people, I think the pressure has to come up with people like us. I mean, the people who are the actual who feel the actual damage, or who are the actual sufferers. The pressure has to come from them. So I think uh, the gap mainly is with ourselves. I mean, we lack a proper sensitization and awareness, which is getting reflected on these policy makers and decision making people, and it becomes a political, decision also. So I think we have to start at a very young age, probably at the school level. I mean, to uh, make them more aware of these concepts, which might in the long run be beneficial.
Yes, ma'am. I will also agree to that. That was quite a presentation, ma'am. I thank you for spending your time with us. We'll take a photograph of all the participants with yourself, ma'am. So if
Oh,
you
sure,
please
no
can
problem.
stay
Yeah.
online. Yeah. So I would request all the participants to switch on their videos so we can take the photograph.
రిజిస్ట్రేషన్ ఓపెన్ అయితే చేయండి పంపిస్తాను 11 days అది అన్మ్యూట్ చేసేది
Since we are way ahead of schedule, would any of the participants have any further queries or would you like to comment or interact with the speaker? If somebody is yeah, I see that someone's speaking, but can you please unmute yourself because we can't hear you? Is it Dr. Sainu Franco? Ma'am, you may have to unmute yourself. Dr. Sainu, you're not audible. So, ma'am, your voice is very feeble. Is it Harshita? Ma'am, your voice is very feeble. If you're trying to speak, please speak out louder. Maybe if you turn off your cameras, the audio will come through better. So you can, the photographs have been taken, so you can all switch off your cameras.
Okay.
Okay. Harshita ma'am and Sainu ma'am, will you like to comment on something, or shall we close the session? Am I audible now? You're very feeble. You're very feeble. I can't hear you at all. Okay. Yeah. All right. Sainu ma'am, if you have any doubts, can you please drop it in the chat box? Maybe I can ask it out. That would be better since we can't hear you at all. Audience പറയുക, participants പറയുക. And you can hear them, the participants. ചെറിയതായിട്ട് കേൾക്കുന്നു. Okay. I think that is it. There might be some issues from the of the internet with the participants as well. Kindly drop your queries in the chat box. I think that's best for both of us. Your questions can also be addressed, and we can also, ensure that your questions are heard. Uh, so I think with this we'll close the meeting with Tara ma'am's presentation. We understand that the threat that we face is not just a threat to the to human Homo sapiens, but a threat to the entire ecosystem. But what we should be aware is that the Earth has survived for the past 1.5 billion years, and we have only survived for a very little point of time during the whole era. So we are more prone to the threat than Mother Earth will ever be. So Tara ma'am, thank you so much for the presentation. Um, I think we'll close the meet for now.
Yeah, thank you
Thank
so
you for
much
the
for
facility.
being with me throughout the session. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. We'll close the session for 2 minutes. We'll come back at 45, 12:45 with the next speaker. The next speaker is architect K.T. Ravindran. So yeah, we'll join back in another. We'll join back at 12:45. Thank you.
Tino, my session starts at 1 o'clock.
Yes, sir. Shall we start it at 1 or 12:45? It's as per your
Yes,
convenience. We can do either.
I think it's best to give them a break.
Okay. Then we'll start at 1, sir.
Sure, sure. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Sir, you'll join 5 minutes prior so that we can see that your PPT is working, right?
Yes, I send the
Yeah.
PPT to you.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll just check that right away.
Yeah, I'll just join in a second.
Okay, sir. Yeah, I've received your PPT.
Okay.
എന്നെയും ബ്രേക്ക്ഔട്ടിൽ ഇട്ടോ ആണോ 1 o'clock. So can you hear me here as well? So you're on mute, so I can't hear you. I hope you can hear me here as well on the. Nitin unmute ചെയ്യാൻ പറ്റുമോ? രവീന്ദ്രൻ sir ഒന്ന് unmute ചെയ്യ്. Sir, can you hear me here? So in the lower section of the panel on the Cisco, you'll have to come back to the Cisco WebEx panel. And on the lower section, you have this unmute option. So can you minimize the PPT, please? I'm not. ഞാൻ സാറിനെ വിളിക്കുകയാണ്.
Hello. Hi. Okay, no problem. Yeah. So you just start the presentation. Okay. If I say that, you will be listening, no? If I say next, can you change it? I think that will, because we have only 4 minutes left. I'm not even sure if I can counter my problem by then. This goddamn bar is hiding everything for me. Okay, I'd go. Sorry, I can do that, yeah. Okay.
Hello, sir, can you hear us? Hello? Sir, can you hear me? Hello, sir, can you hear me? Hello, sir.
Can you hear me? Hello? Hello, Tino, can you hear me? Hello, Deja. Hello. Hello. Yeah, I can hear you. I have actually unmuted and I have started the video, but they can't still hear me. Okay, I'll try. Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah. So why don't you start the presentation, Tino?
Yes.
That's it. No.
Right now it's yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Now it's open. Yeah.
Yes. We'll just introduce to a minute. I just hand it over
Yeah.
to.
Hello. Hello, can you hear me? Yeah, Tino, can you hear me? I don't see anything on the screen. I just see a black screen.
Yes, I was just introducing you. There was a small mic problem. I'll just introduce
All right,
you.
all right, all right.
Start the session.
No problem. Yeah. Okay, all right. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, sir.
Bye.
I hope I'm audible to you right now.
Yes, you're right. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, sir. Perfectly well. Yes, sir.
All right.
So, for the participants, I'll just introduce you to K.T. Ravindran, sir. K.T. Ravindran, sir, is an urban designer who is chairman of the Architectural Heritage Advisory Committee of INTAC. He's a trustee of the Indian Heritage Cities Network Foundation, trustee of the Madhavan Nair Foundation, and was member of the advisory board for the United Nations Capital Master Plan, New York. He was also Dean and Senior Academic Advisor, RICS School of Built Environment, member of the International Jury for the AP Capital Complex, and subsequently member of the Expert Committee for Balanced Regional Growth of AP State, including the capital. He was formerly Vice Chairman of the Environmental Impact Assessment Committee, Government of India. His most recent work was the preparation of resilient urban design framework for low-income state housing in Tamil Nadu. He taught urban design for 3 decades in SPA Delhi and was the founding president of the Institute of Urban Designers India. Member Governing Council of NID Vijayawada, member National Advisory Committee on Hriday Cities, mentor for the Smart City Mission on Public Open Spaces. He was the former chairman of the Delhi Urban Art Commission. He has traveled extensively across the world, and his current practice includes design of greenfield cities, cultural buildings, memorials, adaptive reuse, and urban conservation. His works and research are published in journals and books internationally. He has consistently pursued sustainable architecture and urban design, championing the cause in multiple international forums and academia. We are thoroughly grateful, sir, for accepting our invite. I'll start presenting the screen and you can speak, sir. So can you see the screen now?
Not yet. Yep. Can you maximize the screen? Is that possible to maximize it? Yeah.
Yes. I think there's a little bit of a lag. I maximize it. I can see that it's not come on the screen. So yes, sir.
Okay, that's good. Okay, so I'll be talking to you about today about climate change mitigation and sustainability as interconnected issues. I won't go into more details about explaining. We'll get into the presentation. Before that, my sincere apologies for this communication mess up. Is largely from my side. Tino has been very generous in trying to help me out in getting the connection. Now she's presenting it on my behalf. Thank you, Tino, and please move on to the next one. Can you change the slide?
Yes, sir. There's a slight lag. So I've changed the slide. It will come in a few seconds. Sorry, sir.
Okay. All right. So that's okay. Thank you. I'll now explain to you what this means. On your left-hand side, you will see a diagram or circle, which is like the yin-yang, where the built environment and nature are interacting with each other and are mutually generative of each other. Yeah? So the division here is between our internal environment and the external environment. That's externally this natural environment and the city. Internally, there is an environment in our consciousness, which is what we call our culture of interaction. You know? And that's what is represented in the second circle at the bottom. Now, one side is nature, the other side is culture. They are a part of a continuum or a whole and if you change one, you impact the other one. So nature here is the primary layer, and the built environment is the secondary layer. In other words, when we design or when we intervene in an environment, we need to consider that nature is the primary layer, and that compromises on nature is going to yield to disaster. And the secondary layer can impact the primary layer negatively, but nature has the capacity to impact our secondary layer positively. Both functions function as a continuum. That is, it's actually one and the same thing. The marking threshold is actually our consciousness, where our mind begins. Our mind begins understanding, interpreting, and formulating action. But on the outside is nature, which is actually functioning as a continuum with our mind. And they are mutually impactive. You alter one, you alter the other. In other words, you alter the physical environment, you will find that your internal environment also undergoes change. And vice versa. You change your internal environment and you will be on your destructive path on the natural environment. Now, the dynamics of growth of a city continually redefines the balance between these two. Ideally, we should arrive at a place where we have a balanced condition between nature and our environment. Then conceptually, circles of sustainability record the shifting balances between nature and built environment. What we call sustainability is actually the shifting of balances between nature and the built environment. And this is a continuous dynamic process. It is not a static process. Next one, please.
I just
please change the
informed
slide.
Yes, it is quite a lag. So you'll have to wait a few seconds before it's shown on the screen.
Sure. All right, so now we have to account for this loss of time as well between one slide and the other. So now I'll show you how the idea of sustainability as we understand today is actually not a given thing, but it's something which has been progressively defined by various stages and steps in our scientific and growth of the thought process of humanity. Now, as far as urban development is concerned, I would say that Sir Patrick Geddes, who visited India between 1915 and 1918, was the prime mover in India of this idea of connectivity. I quote here, "For the active minds of Europe have long been asking for such outlets for emancipation from the mechanical," this is a very important part, "from the mechanical, the materialistic, and the monetary influences which have been dominating economic, social, and political spheres." I think this is more true than ever. Right now, if you look at the conditions in India, I think the idea of influencing monetary and militaristic and mechanical interventions, influencing and dominating social, economic, and political spheres is become more acutely visible in today's India. Yeah. And here, his quote is from 1918, and here is in 1966, there's this man called Glenn T. Seaborg, who wrote that at the rate we are currently adding carbon dioxide to our atmosphere, mind you, this is in 1966 that he's talking about carbon dioxide, 6 billion tons a year at that time. Within the next few decades, and the heat balance of the atmosphere would be altered enough to produce marked changes in the climate changes, which we might have no means of controlling, even if by that time we have made great advances in our programs of weather modification. He was a Nobel laureate, a scientist, and he was the head of the United States Atomic Energy Commission. Can you imagine, back in 1966, he foresaw that global warming would lead to climate change. This is the first time in modern times that the word climate change was linked to the idea of, the heat. The heat balance of the atmosphere could be altered enough to produce marked changes in the climate. Yeah, this is the first time in 1966. Could you move on? Next slide. Now here, chronologically tracked how this idea of sustainability has undergone an evolutionary process, and that idea still continues here. Can you all hear me?
Yes, sir, we can hear you.
All right. Okay. So in 1969, there was this man called Professor Ian McHugh, who in the mid-70s wrote, in the mid-70s, he in India became aware of the idea of ecology as a new science through the teachings of American landscape architect Professor Ian McHugh. Ian McHugh was teaching in the UPenn, University of Pennsylvania, and a lot of the Indian landscape architects like Ravi Bhan and Aditya Paul and all are students of Ian McHugh, and they also worked with him. And it is through them that the idea of ecology as most central to landscape design was brought into India. And where he wrote this very well-known book called Design with Nature, which revolutionized the way we saw the designed landscape. This was a very important step that happened in 1969. I graduated in 1968. I had never heard of him till I came to do urban design, and I had Ravi Bhan, who was a student, as a teacher in my studio. So back in between 1959 and 1993, Joseph Ellenstein, another American architect, you're all probably very familiar with him, was working and living and working in India. And he said, if architecture is not able to deal with the problems of the environment, it will become progressively redundant in future. This is a prophetic statement back in 1993 from Joseph Stein. Then in 1972, we have the UN Environmental Program being launched. United Nations Environment Program. It's called UNEP, which is now a functioning body. It was first UN Environment Conference was held in Stockholm to take stock of the conditions of the environment, how sustainability issues of sustainability, climate change, and global warming, etc., would be addressed through development. It was first time addressed in the Stockholm Conference in 1972 as a collective by the United Nations. Next one, please. It's a very strange thing. All right, here we go to the next step, that is 1975. The word global warming was used upfront by the US scientist Wallace Joker. Can this discussion be muted?
Just a second, sir. I request all participants to mute your mics. There's quite a disturbance in between. Please mute yourself.
All right, so now shall I continue? So in 1975, we have first time the word global warming be used by the US scientist Wallace Brooker, who puts the term global warming into the public domain in the title of a scientific paper. So the word global warming became focused in 1975. And then in 1976, we have the first UN conference on human settlements in Vancouver, where the idea of sustainability was addressed for the first time. In 1987, we have the Brundtland Commission. Gro Harlem Brundtland, a lady, who was the person who brought in what is called our common future, rallied the countries at a cluster of nations, not just individuals or scientists or institutions, but entire nations to be brought together to understand that we have just one future, which is a connected collective future, that's a common future, and pursue sustainable development. We need to pursue sustainable development together. And she popularized and defined the term sustainable development. Next one, please. Tino, are you changing?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So in 1988, we have what is called the IPCC formed, that is Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. As I said, nations got involved in the issue of sustainability and started looking at planning and development as a collective future. And their function was to collate and assess evidence on climate change. Yeah? And she was awarded Nobel Prize in 2007. Yeah? And in 1992, we have the term ecological footprint being coined for the first time. I'm showing you all this because these are all milestones in the way we ideate around the concept of sustainability. Yeah? In ecological footprint was written, land area required to supply, this is the definition of ecological footprint as defined by the Canadian ecologist William Rees. He said land area required to supply a city or nation with food or timber products, he says timber because it's a natural product, as well as absorb its output of waste. This is defined as now called the ecological footprint. So we are always talking about reducing our ecological footprint. That simply means that we need to look at the resources that we require. Land resource, land, when you say land, it implies water, vegetation, everything that is on land. It requires what we require as a nation to supply food and timber products, as well as the land area that is used by a nation, and that determines what is the ecological footprint. Okay, this was coined in 1992, and again in 1992, what is called the Agenda 21, declared by the UN, non-binding action plan of the UN with regard to sustainable development. It was not binding on nations at that time. It's a product of the Earth Summit held in Rio. That's in Brazil. Yeah? Next one, please. In 1995 again, we have a very well-known architect, Richard Rogers, who you may recall as the person who designed the Bobo Center in Paris and the Lloyd's building in London and so on, and has been one of the forerunners in thinking about sustainability in the world in contemporary times. So as a modern practicing architect, he wrote a very small book called The Cities for a Small Planet in 1995. It's a seminal book addressing issues of urbanization, sustainability, and climate change, written by a modern architect. I remember I used to, when I taught urban design in SVA, I used to in my classes read out chapters from this book to my students. This is a seminal book. It simply changed the way we think about cities. And next step happens in 2000. I wait for the sound. Yeah.
All participants, please mute yourself. We have already lost on a bit of time. So please mute yourselves to avoid any disturbances.
So in 2000, we have what is called the United Nations Global Compact, brought in by Kofi Annan. Now, this Global Compact, UN Global Compact, is a principle-based framework for businesses. Yeah, that is, from nation to cities, we have moved to specific segments of businesses, stating 10 principles in the areas of human rights, labor, environment, and anti-corruption. For the first time, the UN sought to engage in a dialogue in sustainability directly with industries, including the construction industry. So I was lucky to participate in the 15th year conference of this a few years ago in New York in the General Assembly, where different industries were represented. And I was part of the delegation which represented the construction industry. The main idea was generally, as a practice, the UN works only with governments. They don't work with institutions specifically or with businesses. Now, this is the first time that Kofi Annan made this shift in 2000 of working directly with businesses. And interestingly, the conference I attended as a member of the construction industry, there were only 5 delegates, all of us. And there was even the Association of Gun Makers in that. So even they saw themselves having a role to play in Association of Gun Makers. Even they found a role to play in issues of sustainability. So this is like how much the reach of this is. And this Global Compact is now a continuing program of the United Nations. Next one, please. In 1987, before that, let me tell you about this cartoon. This cartoon is by a cartoonist called Ponnappa, architect from the Chennai school. He was a year junior to me when I was doing architecture. He was a year junior to me. He's now become a professional cartoonist. And this is a cartoon from him on the Bangalore's air quality. It's a very telling cartoon. I don't have to explain that to you. And in 1987, development meets the needs of the present. The definition of sustainability was development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. In other words, the emphasis, this is what the Brundtland Commission, the lady's picture image that I showed you, the Brundtland Commission had recommended that we need to conserve our resources. Sustainability is about development that conserves resource for the future generation to meet their requirements. That means we should leave what we received as it is and pass it on to our next generation. Now that whole idea undergoes a paradigm shift in 2015 when UN SDGs, that is United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, were declared in 2015. So 1987 was this concept of sustainability as resource conservation. And here in UNSDG, the shift of focus, sorry, don't go back as yet, please. Okay, I'll just, the sustainability of resources to sustainable relationship between human and the ecosystem. It is about the here and now and not only about the future. This is the major shift that has happened in sustainable concepts of sustainability, is about your action now. It's not something that you conserve for the future. It's about what you do now that is more critical or equally critical as our relationship with humans and our human relationship with the ecosystem and humanity. Next one, please. Now, here are the SDGs, and it was brought out under Mr. Ban Ki-moon, who was the Secretary General at that time. He was a great environmentalist, and he was very keen to ensure that sustainability is practiced across the world. And he defined, and the whole committee that was set up to do this, they defined these 17 different goals under what is sustainable. Now, the major shift, as I said, was from materials, conservation of resources, to including the human beings in the process of interaction between resources and human beings. So the first thing that you see here is poverty. First sustainability goals is to reduce poverty. Next one is about hunger. Third one is about energy, and it goes on and on. It's only the goal number 11 that actually directly addresses the built environment. Yeah, and then it goes on to include, for the first time, it also brought in the issue of climate change. Yeah? So India became a signatory of this. This was done in 2015, and India became a signatory of this in 2017. Now, every 5 years, this is your own action as a nation is to be assessed by looking at what kind of pro-climate change, pro-sustainability development that you have practiced. And I'm afraid we are going to show a very sorry face when it's assessed, because we know the rate at which trees are being cut down in our country. Just the Char Dham highway project alone, in connecting different pilgrimage places, which is currently going on, has planned to cut down 56,000 trees, of which 36,000 are already chopped down. Yeah, and we know what happened a few days back in Uttarakhand. So our record on this is not very good, and I'm afraid when we start assessing it, it's going to be a figure. And how to improve this, in fact, lies in your hands and my hands, in every individual's hands. And as teachers of architects and planners and others who work with the built environment, the responsibility is doubly there with us. Yeah? Next one, please. Don't worry about remembering all these 17 goals, because I've already passed on the whole PPT to Tino, and she should be able to distribute it to all of you who are participants so that you can have a copy of the presentation. So this factual information you can keep with yourself and you can use it in your classes in future. Now, in 2021, in Uttarakhand, this is the result of the kind of brutal development that we have practiced. Few days ago, and it's still continuing, the problem still continues as an impending danger. The remains of the hydropower plant, after the image that you see here, is the remains of the hydropower plant after severe flooding in India's northern state of Uttarakhand. Yeah, and this is how did this snow melt in winter? The winter is supposed to be very severe this year. And how did it melt in winter? So that remains a mysterious question, and scientific inquiries are going on right now on this. Next one, please. Now, from the evolution of the idea concept of sustainability, we'll move to the causes and consequences of climate change. Yeah. So, agenda 13 of the 17 goals.
Madam, ಬರ್ರಿ madam ಒಂದ್ಸಲ ಮಾತಾಡಿ ಬಲ್ವಂತ ನಾನು ಏನ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾನೆ ಬಂದಿ ಕೂತ್ಕೊಂಡು who said you to
participants please mute yourself.
PF ಕಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾರಂತ ನಿಮ್ಗೆ ಯಾರು ಹೇಳಿದಾರ PF ಯಾರು ಕಟ್ ಮಾಡಿಸ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರಾ ನೀವು you are interested in cutting your PF you are interested to PF ಕಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾರಲ್ಲ ನಾ ಹೇಳ್ತೀನಿ ನಿಮ್ಗೆ
Rubina, you'll have to mute yourself.
ನಂದು ನಿಮ್ದು ಅವ್ರ ಮಾತಿಂದ ಹರೀಶ್ ಕಡೆನೂ ಹೋಗ್ಬಾರ್ದು ಅಷ್ಟು ಕಾನ್ಫಿಡೆನ್ಸ್ ಆಗಿ ಹೇಳ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀನಿ ಮೇಡಮ್ forget about Malappuram. I am not interested in those people.
You're all taking a lesson in Kannada.
They are not helpful to us. Madam,
I'm really sorry sir for the disturbance.
cut ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದಾರಲ್ಲ ಅವರು
Rubina. Sorry sir.
Sorry, is it okay now? Yeah. Okay. So here from the evolution of sustainability, which finally culminates in the formulation of the SDGs and the shift in focus from the material conservation to human material conservation together and as an interactive process, we have now moved to climate change and its mitigation. Can you please go back? Yeah. So there are these causes of climate change. First one is global warming. Okay, partly man-made, partly by other means. We have increased solar flares. We are going through a 12-year cycle of solar flares. That is, the flares happening in the sun is altering the balances of gravity on Earth. That's a very simple explanation, but there's a lot more to it. Then depleting of the ozone layer, shifting of Earth's axis. Every time there is an earthquake, there's a shift in axis, there's partial restoration of the axis, but shift still remains permanent. That alters the climate. Then change in gravity, then planetary alignments. There are studies to show that when a number of planets align themselves, that also alters the gravitational flow in the Earth, and it changes the climatic responses of the Earth to the natural forces. Then we have shifting of the ocean current, and we have insensitive human activity. A lot of these ozone layer, a lot of these things that you see about are actually also contributed by human beings. But now none of these things are anymore in our control. They're all forces which are already unleashed. What we can do is to mitigate the impact of climate change on human lives. And the consequences of this climate change is that it's melting of the polar ice and rise in temperature, which is actually mutually causative. Melting of glaciers, which we have seen now in Uttarakhand. Rise in sea levels, that is, as a consequences of this melting, you have increased sea level and increased frequency of earthquakes and tsunamis. In Earth's crust, conditions of the Earth crust, higher quantity and frequency of flood waters, because everything is coming down from the north to the south. Then we have change in animal and insect behavior. As the temperature changes, the insects' breeding capacity and tendency increases. So there's going to be a massive increase, expected increase in the insect population, which will have a very invasive effect on our agrarian system. We have already seen this year how the locust attack had happened in north of India. Now, this is the first harbinger of this kind of change that will come from temperature into insect and animal behavior. Even human behavior will become more and more aggressive, self-seeking, and we will begin things like more and more wars happening, yeah, because of the increase in climate change. Then we have coastal erosion that is taking place and the inundation of the coastal settlements. All these are the consequences of climate change. Now the question is, how do we mitigate them? Next one, please. Now here some of the methods through which we develop a resilient urbanization is discussed here. Many of the causes for climate change are beyond human control, but insensitive human action quickens the process of change. It quickens, it accelerates, it aggravates the process of change. And our future needs to be secured both through climate change mitigation and future preparedness in planning. That's where our action areas lie. The actions are twofold, that is working towards resilient urbanization so that we reduce the ill effects of climate change on human settlements, and we create resilient communities. We work on people in such a way that they become aware of the causes of these changes, and they begin to respond as well as they get ready to combat it. Now, resilient urbanization has, I've identified different areas in which we need to develop resilience. First one is we need to worry about sea level rise. In other words, we have to start moving back from the coastal line. Okay, we know that in Kerala recently there's been the demolition of two multi-story buildings which are built in the wrong place. And the consequences of not doing that across the board is going to very soon be falling on the heads of people when the sea level is beginning to rise. Yeah, it is said that in another 20 years we'll have like almost 1.5 meters, 2 meters of rise in the sea level, and that's going to flood a lot of our coastal cities. So flooding, both from the sea level rise as well as increased and infrequent and more frequent rainfall in the hills, will bring more waters gushing down the rivers while the sea level is rising. So humanity is going to be caught between these two forces, one coming from the top and the other happening from the sea. Now, earthquakes and tsunamis will be also areas where we have to work against, we have to plan against. The picture that you see here is from Bhuj in 2000, the 2001 earthquake, January 2001 it was. This is my own photograph of it. I went visiting at that time. And this is how the stilted area is reactive to an earthquake. You can see the column has been totally ripped open by the shear forces because the buildings are moving laterally, and the stiff joint in the column and the beam is split open. This is earthquake response. Yeah. So these are all things which are within our hands. Then there are areas where we have to think about resilience when we do the design. And of course, that earth is a whole big subject. I will not go into it, that we've been divided into 5 zones and so on. And next issue is the issue of fire. You know that 90% of the fires in India are due to faulty electrical lines, building fires, and that's a major danger that we have to make our buildings. We can't make it fireproof, but we can make it easy for people to escape when there's a fire. Yeah? And we'll have to deal with the increased heat. Summers are going to be more and more severe, and we need to move to the kind of design which will mitigate heat. Yeah? And then we have also the health pandemic, which is now surfaced. It's also said that as and when we keep invading the forests and we keep altering the ecology of the forest, more and more of these viruses will migrate into animals and from animals to human beings. Yeah? So we have seen the first pandemic and we've seen how devastating it is. And it's very important now that we work with them. Yeah? Next one, please. Now, this is an image of the Kerala coast, particularly the entire coastal areas of the world has been mapped for climate change. And I've isolated the images of the Kerala coast. What you see here is the Cochin almost in the center of the coast, and how by certain degrees of rise in the climate, rise of temperature in the so how water levels are going to start invading the land. Now, 2 to 4 degree centigrade anticipated rise in global temperature will create a water world along the coastal areas of India. Yeah. Cities like Mumbai, Cochin, Chennai, and other coastal areas, centers, urban centers, will be underwater. Yeah, this is not a very long time in the future. This is very soon in the future. Yeah? And coastal areas are in the most populated and climate risk areas. Climate risk would impact large numbers of population. In India, a very huge number of people live along the coast. All our major cities, port cities, have developed into major cities, and they are all very high concentrations of people, and therefore larger and larger number of people are going to be victims of the rise in water. Yeah? And climate change responsive development has to arrest global warming below 2 degrees and to avert this calamity. Development needs to address climate change up front. This is very much within our hands. Yeah? But of course, it's not in our hands to decide whether the seawater will rise or not. You can see that the hinterland of Kochi and the backwaters going up to Quilon and towards Trivandrum, you will find that the entire place will become inundated in water. So what happens to all these cities that we have along the coast? This is a very dangerous scenario that we need to still anticipate. By 2100, Cochin scenario is going to be the one that you see below this in red. Yeah. Next one, please. Here we have the action areas. I'll very quickly cover this part because I'm running out of time. I'm very sorry that it was my fault that we started a good 20 minutes late. Now, these are areas which have been identified by the global warming climate change team, the areas that you see along the west coast, and there are similar areas on the east coast also. And we know that there's a huge number of people in India are dependent on the seafront for their livelihood. Here, the image that you see here is actually one image, which has a parapet line going across, so it looks like two images. This is from the low-income housing near Marina Beach in Chennai, where you can see the entire population's livelihood and is dependent only on the sea and its immediate presence. And their activities spread from the housing that's provided for them to right up to the seafront. So these are going to be very, very vulnerable communities. Now, climate change will impact the following areas profoundly. Yeah? Now, as my job here is to tell you about the macro issues, I am not going to talk specifically about urban planning and earthquake-proof design and so on, but I've emphasized the need for them. But more importantly, we have to look at the broader and macro issues which humanity is going to face because of the climate change. So I have identified 6 different ways in which it's going to impact. First is that it will impact our food security. Okay. Secondly, it will impact our water security. We'll have a lot of water, but it'll be saline. You know? We'll have a problem with drinking water. Then there'll be energy security. There will be waste management. This is humanizing the cities because, as I said, there's going to be massive changes. When you change the external environment, you're going to find change in the internal environment of people. We are expected to behave differently when the climate rises, the temperature rises, and we'll have to worry about how we'll humanize our cities. And we have to look at technology and urban design as issues which will also be impacted by climate change. Next one, please. So I'll go through these things very, very quickly, and there are some methods and measures which I've described here. I will be passing these slides on to you. So would you like me to go through each of these, or should I just leave it for you to read? And if you have queries, you can raise it with me on email if you like, in the interest of time, because I'd certainly like to have at least 10 minutes for discussion, 15 minutes for discussion. Yeah. So anyway, the issues are right here. And I have also demonstrated how these specific action areas regarding food security will impact what are the SDGs it will have direct impact on. Yeah. So 2, 3, 12, 14, and 15 will be directly impacted. Almost everything will be impacted by 11 that I'm leaving out of this, because 11 is the specific SDG which addresses urban development. It will have overall everything will have an impact on that. But these are specific areas where we could be going for mitigative measures. Next one, please. I'll be sharing slides with you, so you can raise questions to me on email later, because in the interest of having some time for discussion, I will not go through in detail of this. Here we have the issues of water security. The image that you see here is from Chennai, where you can see how the most vulnerable crowd in the least privileged people in the slums are actually the most troubled by water scarcity. Yeah? We know that the way we distribute water is so unequal in our cities, and water security impacts the poor even more than it impacts the other segments of the economic spectrum. And among the poor, it impacts the women even more, because a huge amount of their time and effort are actually spent in collecting, supplying water to the household. And if this problem is not there, they are ready and free to offer their energies and thinking more creatively to address issues of children or the household or whatever, or even whatever livelihood they are in. So the potential for them to be active creatively in society is reduced immensely by water shortage. And this is an issue that we need to address. Now, on the left, I have the SDGs, which will be actually impacted by this particular issue of water security. Next one, please. Now I move to waste management. This is the third issue in this one, where I have given an image here, which is taken from Richard Rogers' book, The Cities for a Small Planet, which I have earlier described to you as a milestone book in the way we view cities. And the book talks about how from a linear metabolism, we need to move to a circular metabolism. Yeah? A circular metabolism in which the production, consumption, and reuse cycle is established. Yeah? And then how we can achieve that, there are 5 measures which I've described here. I won't go into detail, and how it will impact the SDGs. Which SDGs will be impacted are described on the site. Next one, please. Next is energy security, which we all know is a very, very critical thing. And how we need to have sustainable sources for energy. Right now, 82% of India's electricity is generated by coal, which we know has the highest ecological footprint on the system. Yeah. So this is something which we have to think about. What are the forms? How do we manage demand? How do we close loop the energy waste cycles? Lots of issues are there. You can read through those issues and you can see what SDGs are impacted by the issue of energy security. Next one, please. Now, as far as energy security is concerned, this is visionary architect. I'm particularly bringing out this quote from Laurie Baker. We all know that 40% of all energy produced, this is a global standard, 40% of all energy produced is consumed by the construction industry. That's the industry we serve. So it is our industry which is a huge consumer of energy. Yeah? So if we can do some demand management in our own field, which is very much in our hands, as teachers, it is in your hands to tell your students how to do that. If you can do that, we can mitigate to a large extent. Now, here, one of the greatest problems to face in the next 50 years is that of energy, fuel, power. The pressure of this problem will be less if we make use of energy-free materials, that is, materials which have got less embodied energy as much as possible. One of India's major tasks to provide homes for at least 25 million families. 25 million was the estimate at that time when he gave this code. Now it is 40 odd million, and who have no home. If we are to build burn bricks and concrete and steel, etc., we add to this vast energy problem and to the overall cost of housing these 25 million families. This is a quote from our own visionary architect, Laurie Baker. Next one, please. Now, the fifth issue is how to humanize our cities. Humanizing the city has got three important dimensions which are there in this diagram. One is we need good participatory governance in which people participate in the decisions which will affect their lives. So they are responsible for the impact of their own actions. Then housing and social infrastructure, housing along with social infrastructure. What distinguishes housing from building homes, building houses, is that it also has a comprehensive or holistic environment with social infrastructure built into it. Then work mobility infrastructure would be the third area where we need to improve this. If we can improve these three things, we'll have a much higher quality of life. And that will humanize the cities, apart from these 7 measures which I've outlined here, which pertain to how we can improve the living conditions and sense of belongings in our cities. And the SDGs that are, you can see that a huge number of SDGs are impacted by this, right from poverty to social justice is impacted by humanizing cities. Next one, please. So technology and urban design is the next issue, and that impacts all these 5 issues which have been outlined here. Main thing is that how will, for instance, now new public spaces behave? How well can we harness technology as a tool, not as an end in itself, but as a tool to achieve better human condition? How can we use that through urban design? That's the outline issues that are here. I've again outlined 7 issues here through which you can impact the built environment by way of use of technology to create more livable urban environments. And the SDGs are outlined. Next one, please. Now, I want to tell you a little bit about the climate change and urbanization trends in India. Right now, 55.7% of the world population, or 4.3 billion people, live within cities. And proportionately by 2050, 6.6 billion, or 68% of the world population, will live in cities. This is going to be a huge number to deal with. And India is proceeding rather unthinkingly about this, driven by greed for more and more industry and more so-called quote-unquote development, which is a false notion about how to improve human well-being. We have enough people in cities, we have enough people in our country, we need to improve their lot. What we don't need is to improve the amount of pollution that we create, the insanitary conditions we create, increase the number of cities that we have. What we need is to actually look at how to improve our condition. But right now there's a trend in urbanization that's taking place in India, is that hierarchically ordered network regional cities were linked to by their proximity in the 1986 what is called the Korea Committee report, or the last urbanization report we had in India. We have not had a report on urbanization after that. And right now, from this kind of networked city idea or the constellation type of city concepts, the planners are now moving to this linear development, which is completely infrastructure based. That's why they're wanting to spend so much money. You've seen the kind of allocation that this budget is given to infrastructure development. Kerala itself has something like 65,000 crores being invested on infrastructure. How many trees are going to go? I don't know whether we'll have any count on the number of trees that go when we start widening roads and increasing highways and making new connectivities, making fast track trains and laying new lanes. All that money and the pressure that is going to bring about is going to create a crisis in our infrastructure. So infrastructure-based linear corridors that connect greenfield smart cities is the new concept. Networked constellation of cities was what was there earlier. And what we can probably what it will lead to is more and more what we call the conurbation type of development, where linear connected network of cities will start developing. Kerala already has this networked linear pattern because of the specific geography of its specific land profile of the state. But that's a totally different debate. I won't go into that. Can we move on to the next one? So when we talk about India and its ability to deal with sustainability and climate change, the most interesting thing is that we already have in our psyche of our nation a fundamental notion about a reverential relationship development, reverential relationship with nature. We worship nature. And Gandhi had said that we have enough for everyone's need, but not for everyone's greed. We very well-known quotation, I don't have to repeat this to you. A just society with equal opportunities is the underpinning of a sustainable urban environment. Do we have just society? We have equal opportunity. Do we have equal opportunities in our society? Absolutely no. But this is what the new SDGs outline as the fundamental premise for us as long-term sustainable development. So sustainability is not about competition, it's about cooperation. So the future lies not in how we compete with each other, which is unfortunately the pattern that's being unleashed, but on how we cooperate with each other to deal with this common problem. And as you can see, this actually impacts a large number of SDGs. Next one, please. Here's a very interesting thing that's been happening in our country. When Gandhiji came out with his 5 principles, which are in the red box here, the problem of global warming is linked to the globalization of high consumption. Let's not forget that, because consumption is the most important cycle that actually impacts production as well as waste generation. So the entire cycle of sustainability is impacted by what is in our control is the idea of consumption. So the Gandhian worldview was informed by the concept of aparigraha. I repeat, aparigraha, which simply means non-possession. And interestingly, this concept does not come as an original idea from Gandhiji, but it's come from the Jain Tirthankara, 24th Jain Tirthankara, who lived around 6th century BC. It comes from him that there are these 5 principles around which he organized his life. First was non-violence, ahimsa, which is the primary thing that Gandhiji propagated. Then he talked about truthfulness, satya, which is what Gandhi's autobiography is called, By Experiments with Truth. Non-possession, that is aparigraha, is so critical to control consumption. And non-stealing, that is asteya. Non-stealing does not mean that you actually go and steal from someone. It means that you simply don't deprive anyone else, any other human beings, the environment of its resources. Then chastity, which is brahmacharya, that he propagated because of self-control. Self-control is the key to the control of your environment. Yeah. So this is why they did fasting and all that sort of thing, because that's why you see that the ancient munis were credited with so much power that they could look at the tree and the bird will look at the bird and the bird will drop dead from the tree, because that was the kind of power they had. And that power is generated by tapasya, which is actually the increased control of your own mind. And the more the control of your mind, that the more you have control over your environment. It's a very basic principle of interconnected internal consciousness and interconnection with nature. So these are principles which are embedded in the Indian psyche. Yeah, aparigraha, that simple life and great thinking, is an idea which was propagated by all these people. And Mahavira spoke of all these in the 6th century BC, 2,600 years ago. He spoke of this. Yeah, and that's still remaining in the psyche of the Indian people. All these are still remaining. That's why we have a huge amount of vegetarianism and so on in our country compared to many other countries. And we are already embedded with this, the psyche for reacting positively to ideas of sustainability and climate change. Next one, please. So here I come back again to these two great stalwarts who, Laurie Baker worked in tandem with Gandhi's concept. So in 1944, when Baker met Gandhiji in Bombay, through a common friend, he was born a Quaker. Quaker is a kind of a sect which practiced, kind of charity and helping others and so on as a central core ideas. Baker was all of 27 at that time when he met Gandhiji, and he was fired by a deep sense of idealism that found an instant resonance in Gandhiji's ways. Encouraged by Gandhiji's appreciation for his recycled shoe, it's a very simple thing. You might think that this is an irrelevant information, but it's a very relevant information, because the fact that Baker recycled his shoes and he did not throw it away shows that he was already practicing aparigraha. He was minimizing the amount of consumption that he was doing. And Gandhiji noticed that and he appreciated that. And his invitation to come back and work with the Indian poor, Baker soon returned and chose to work in the remote villages of northern India, northeast India, in fact. Then he came to work in Kerala. So wastefulness was anathema to Baker's worldview, and a pragmatic minimalism informed his work. Much like Gandhi also practiced the minimalism. He threw away his stitched shirt in Madurai, actually, when he was staying as the guest of a textile trader. He took off his shirt and threw it away, and he wore only a khadi cloth after that on top as an angavastra. Yeah? So much like Gandhi, Baker created an aesthetic of the minimal, completely embedded in the local environmental context. This is very critical for us to understand how to take the future forward in sustainability and climate change. Next one, please. This is my last slide. I say thank you to you for that after this. And we'll have, I don't know, maybe 5 minutes discussion. But this is an image that I took, a photograph which I took on the walls of the Sabarmati Ashram. It's an old board, you can see, and it was on the walls of the Sabarmati Ashram, framed and hanging. He says, I do not want my house to be walled in all sides and my windows to be stuffed. Very important message for our current condition. Yeah, I do not want, this is about inclusion, not about exclusion. I don't want my house to be walled in on all sides and my windows to be stuffed. I want the cultures of all lands to be blown about my house as freely as possible, but I refuse to be blown off my feet by any. This is a quote, and I think this is why we need to keep our ears and eyes open There's nothing called Western knowledge and Eastern knowledge. There is global inheritance of knowledge. And we are the inheritors of whatever has happened in so many thousand years across the globe. And at the same time, it is important that we realize ourselves and stay on our own 2 feet. Yeah? This is Gandhi's message for us. And I think there can't be a more apt message to fight climate change in future than this. Thank you all for listening. Now, Tino, if we have time, I'll be happy to take questions, but I don't know if we have time. It's 2:30 now, or 2:27. Thank you. Thank you. Sorry I had to rush through, and my apologies once again for starting the delay. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. The presentation was thoroughly insightful and interesting. We really held on to every word of yours for its resourcefulness. Thank you, sir, for the same.
Thank you.
We have not received any questions in the chat box. I'll just open it out for a minute to the participants to raise any queries.
It'll be nice if we can see the participants.
Yes, I request all participants to switch on their videos. I'll switch off the presentation now so that you can see it.
I'm open to any kind of thing that move that you want to make. Thank you.
The participants, please raise your queries.
We have with us in the audience Satya Prakash, who is a guru of sustainability.
Sir,
Satya,
you are my
guru.
Katie, you are my guru.
This is, you scratch my back, I scratch my back. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the influential role you're playing in changing the minds of young people. That's a very, very important role. Yeah, which is what we are all trying to do within the 4 walls of an institution. You're doing it across the nation, across institutions, across
Thank you.
gender, across
Thank
age.
you.
Great thing, Satya. Great thing. Yeah. Any questions?
Yes, the participants, you can unmute yourself to ask questions. I'll take one question. Yes, yes.
UPS bank
Sorry, the voice is broken.
There's a lot of disturbance coming from the participant. Yes. So this is a lot of disturbance. To whoever is speaking, can you please speak aloud?
Tino, can we all stop the video now? It will help in bandwidth.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Your photography done, Tino?
Only the ones who want to speak and unmute can speak. That'll be the best.
Yes, sir. The photographs have been taken. The person who's trying to speak, please switch off your video and try to speak. That will be better, I guess. I understand that we have a lot of difficulties in this online method. Please unmute only.
Alhamdulillah, sir.
This participants, I kindly request you to mute yourself if you are not part of the session. Difficulty to trace who's the one who's speaking. Hold on a second while we figure this out. Katie, sir, I'm really sorry for this. We are unable to.
Actually, it's a disastrous idea.
Mute all ಕೊಡ್ತೈತೆ sir. No.
Kashmir is the academic system, child discuss system. ये मेरी बात सुनो, आज का जो सिस्टम आया, ये हमेशा ये रेसिड्यूल एडिशन, ये कंटिन्यू आया, ऐसा करना है। This
is a mute all option. We tried that, but
सर अगर आप पहले से इनकलकेट करोगे ना जो नए बच्चे थोड़ा सा स्ट्रिक्टनेस बाकी चीजें तो उसमें सर 50% बच्चे ठीक है अगर उनको पहले ही हो गया ना कि
shall we conclude this session because we are really unable to get through this. It will be really kind of you if you could join tomorrow for further queries. Is that all right? Am I audible to you? Okay. I guess it's better now. It's better now. Yeah.
Room number 18 हो क्या? आज मुझे क्लास. चलो मुझे. मुझे ना चलो. चेंज कर दो इधर. ये रूम की बंदी. आज अब मेरे 16 में है. रूम नंबर 18 आपके सामने कोई स्टूडेंट आप देखोगे कोई नहीं है. मैं वहां तक गया. अबे 16 में भी नजर मार गया. एक्चुअली मुझे इनने 2 क्लासेस रखे हैं एक ही टाइम टेबल पे. अब मैंने सोचा था जितने आएंगे यहाँ और वहाँ मेरे को कंबाइन को थाउन आके दो बैठे
सर आप बाबा सर को बोलो ना कि आप एक ही टाइम
हाँ वो मैं बताऊंगा मगर आज कम से कम मैंने कहा आज के वो कल से हो जाएगा बच्चों को कम्युनिकेट हमने किया ना मैं डिपार्टमेंट का अलग बनाऊंगा ना टाइम टेबल फिर वही कम्युनिकेट करूंगा अब आपने ये कि आज के लिए मैंने सोचा था कि दोनों को कंबाइन करना चला गया कोई नहीं है अब वहाँ के कोई होगा ना
Can we close the meeting? Is that all right? I really apologize for this. Yeah. Okay. Thank you for joining us. We are very delighted in having you. Your session was thoroughly influential. So thank you, sir. We hope to associate with you in further endeavors. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. We heard you. To all the participants, there was a few instructions we like to send to all participants. We'll forward it to you in the WhatsApp chat. Please see that. There's an exam which you'll have to attend, so please make sure you check your WhatsApp chat for all the information that is being provided for the regarding the exam. Thank you so much. We'll meet
ये क्लस्टर वाले करने दे तब हम करें ना
हाँ वही मैं कह रहा हूँ यहाँ बाद में बोलते हैं आज ये है परसों एक लड़की ने टोटल एग्जाम नहीं दिया टोटल एग्जाम नहीं दिया और मेरे पास आई उसने लगभग 20
Tino ma'am, please write everything in chat box so that we can hear. Otherwise, we cannot hear anything.
अगर नहीं भेजेंगे आप इसको एडमिशन हॉस्टल में इसका अकोमोडेशन दो
Tino, the session is over, no?
Okay.
When I unmute, nothing happens.
I think you are muted.
Sorry. Yes, Satya, yes, sorry for that. Satya sir, all participants, thank you for joining us today. Thank you for your patience. You have been incredible. We have lost some time, I understand. Thank you for your patience and participation. I kindly request you all to check your audios and videos before you join the meet to avoid any confusion and such disturbances. I wish we had a little bit more time with KT sir to further, to address all our queries. Unfortunately, that could not be done. Anyways, thank you. All further information will be given to you through mail and WhatsApp. Please join the WhatsApp group. Please make sure that you follow all the information that's given in the WhatsApp group. The exam also will be posted. The Google form for the exam will be posted in the group and in mail. You can attend the exam and submit your forms by 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. Right, you have time till tomorrow morning 9 a.m. to answer all your to answer the exam. Please ensure you do that to get your certificates. If there are any further queries, please drop me, Nitin, Dibini ma'am, one of us in our WhatsApps, in our personal chats. We'll respond back to you. Thank you for today. We'll resume tomorrow at 10 a.m. with the same link. I hope that is okay. And
yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tino. Have you made me part of the WhatsApp group?
We'll add you soon. We'll add you right away, sir. We'll add you.
Also check with the other resource people. If any of the other resource people want to be part of it for whatever reason, if they're okay, it's a temporary group. After 2 weeks, you may not keep the group going. Just check with them and inform all. It will be easier for future communication for you.
Sure, sir. We'll do that. We'll do that.
Yeah. Okay. Bye for today.
Thank you, sir. Thank you all. Bye. Enchedo.